All right, Shalom, it's your brother Yonathan. All right, first and foremost, want to give all praises to the Most High, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakah HaKodash. Want to give double honor to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who taught us this truth and rule well. Can't forget about the bishops. Want to say Shalom to all the brothers and, of course, a few sisters pursuing this truth in sincerity. All right, may the blessing of election be upon your house. All right, I entitled this lesson, Satan's going to kick you while you're down. Now, whenever the Lord is refining us, pushing us to be more bold in the spirit, okay, you're going to go through adversities. You're going to go through situations that are uncomfortable, and that's going to look different from brother to brother. And when you do go through those situations, it's always going to be a little insult to injury, and you can see that throughout the scriptures. There's plenty of examples, but the example that I want to hone in on today is in Job, the 2nd chapter. When Job was going through his trials, when he was losing everything, right? Satan hopped on his woman to come at him with this energy. All right, it's the point I want is in Job 2 and 10, but I'm going to start up. Actually, just going to start up here at the top, and it's just going into, not only did Job lose his substance, but he lost, his health. And the scriptures talk about a man will give everything in his bank account to get his health in order. Okay, it's Job 2 and 1. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. This is happening, a meeting in the heavens. Remember, Amos 3 and 6. Shall there be evil in the city and the Lord have not done it? The Lord creates good and evil. Anything that happens, always remember that the Lord has to sanction it first. Before Satan's allowed to do anything and make a move, the Lord has to sanction it first. That's not a concept that you learn in the church, okay? Because if that concept was taught in the church, by default, you would have to teach the fear of the Lord. And the fear of the Lord isn't taught in the world. And if you're teaching the fear of the Lord, then that's the beginning of wisdom. If our people were taught the fear of the Lord, then they would say, well, what pleases the Lord and what displeases him? And then a lot of the things that are pushed by the Edomites, pushed by the wicked, they wouldn't work. If a part of our culture was to fear the Lord, the BS that he pushes in the music, the BS food that he pushes to us, okay, the BS mindsets and rhetoric that he pushes through media, it wouldn't stick the same if our people actually paid attention to what pleased and displeased the Lord. Okay, if they actually knew what the Lord's perspective was on dealing with situations and right and wrong and morality, black culture wouldn't be a thing. Because we say it all the time, black culture is simply a watered down version of white culture. It just has more flavor to it because it's Jake, and Jake's the salt of the earth. All right, we're back here to Job 2 and 1. It says, again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan came also. Satan, what is he doing in heaven? He works for the Lord on the left-hand side. And Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, from whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. That's his job. He puts people in situations, and they have to make a decision whether they're going to serve the Lord in those situations or serve their flesh. Okay? He did the same thing with Yahushai. When he presented him all the kingdoms of the world, I'll give you all of this. Yahushai had to make the decision to serve the Lord in that instance or serve his flesh. And he made the right decision. And Abarat we all follow in his example. Right? Because everybody's going to be putting that in likewise scenarios for their strength. Job 2 and 2. And the Lord said unto Satan, from whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking down in it, up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job? You think Job is the only person that the Lord ever told Satan to consider ever. Come on now. That there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. And remember, the Lord's giving Satan permission to test Job, but it's according to Job's strength. Clearly, Job was a strong man in the spirit, okay? Some of your tests, especially early on in your walk, are not going to be on the level of Job's test, but nonetheless, you will be tested. All right, Job 2 and 3, in the middle here is, and still he holdeth fast to his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. And Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, all that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. He's still in good health. Of course he's going to serve you. I mess with his pockets a little bit. He's dizzy in the pockets. But if I was to touch his health, he'd curse you. Right? So remember, this is what Satan said in the heavens to the Lord. He said that Job would curse him if he let him touch his health. And I want you to keep those same words in your mind as we get down to around verse 8 through 10. Job 2 and 5. But put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. Okay, you can mess with his flesh, but you can't kill him. Verse 7. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot to his crown. Boils from the bottom of his foot to the top of his head. So it probably pained the man to walk, to move around, to sit down, to lay down. Agonizing pain. Verse 8, and he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. All right, and throwing ashes upon your head and amongst our people was a custom to show mourning. Okay? Now, verse 9, it says, then said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. Now, you jump back up to verse 5 there. Satan told the Lord that Job would curse him if you touched his health. And all of a sudden, Job's woman gets in that same spirit and damn near, in a roundabout way, says the same thing that Satan said in verse 5. Because Satan oftentimes, due to our women being the weaker vessel, will hop on your woman for her to think like or talk or think like the world thinks, or to give into the flesh or how the flesh perceives things. It's rare that you'll come across even a man who will be in a tight situation and says, okay, what does the Lord think about the situation? How does the Lord, how would he want me to respond to what I'm going through or how I'm feeling? How would the Lord want me to respond? Very rare. Like you'd be hard pressed to come across a man that thinks that way. How much more so a woman? And Solomon said that, himself. All right. He said, I searched 1,000 women, I found none righteous. So you might have to search 10,000. Okay? Because women, they think, and most men, their allegiance is to how they feel at the time. Their allegiance at the end of the day is to their flesh, how they feel. Their first thought isn't, hold on, let me slow down. How does the Lord tell me to respond to this? All right, Job 2 and 10. But he said unto her, thou speakest, and Job here had the right mindset, which is the mindset we all ought to have. But he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? And all of this did not Job sin with his lips. And evil here is simply just going into a bad time or unhappiness. Sometimes you're going to be unhappy pursuing righteousness in a world that's for its evil. The scriptures say, he that departeth from evil maketh himself a prey. Everything's not going to be comfortable. Everything's not always going to feel good. Standing on the principles the Lord told us to stand on isn't always going to rub the people around you the right way. Shit, it may not rub you the right way. But like the title says, if you got that dog in you, you're willing to deal with what comes with, upholding the Lord's standard. And the brother Osmond Roth in the class this past Saturday even mentioned, I thought it was pretty dope. He brought up Caleb and Joshua, when they were in the wilderness and they were scoping out the Hamites, the towns and the places they had to go through and conquer. They were the only ones that believed. Regardless of what the situation looked like, they trusted that the Lord would have things play out in their favor if they were obedient. And that's something most people can't do. They can't trust that, okay, regardless of what the situation looks like, the Lord's going to have it play out in my favor if I just remain obedient and I fear him. And I stay in that broken and contrite spirit. The Lord's going to be with me regardless. Most people can't think that way because, again, you got to have the gift of faith to think that way. You can't force somebody to have faith. You can't force somebody to see a color, okay, that their eyes can't perceive. Like you can describe a color to somebody that they never seen. All right? Imagine a brand new color popped up on the color wheel. But this person over here never seen it. There's nothing that you could say to him to get him to visualize in his mind that color because he has no reference to it. Faith is likewise. If the Lord hasn't endowed you with the gift of faith, it's not something that you can teach to a person. Okay? It's something that can be nurtured to somebody who has it in the first place. But to somebody who doesn't have it at all, you can't pound it into them. It's a gift. And the word Caleb, by the way, let me go get it. I mean, the name Caleb, when you look it up. Caleb, all right, H3612. It means dog. And you talk about the characteristics of a dog, they're loyal. They'll die behind their master's safety. Okay, you see a lot of homeless people with dogs. You think they're able to feed those dogs every day? No, but that dog sticks with them, thick and thin. And the Lord wants those same characteristics from us. Regardless of what we're going through in our personal lives, how we feel, he wants to know that you're going to stick with them. A lot of people, man, I went through a lot of heartache from brothers that, I'm like, come on, man, stick it out. They were put in situations that made them uncomfortable, that were tough. I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, it wasn't them, bro. They were put in situations that were tough, and they didn't possess that dog-like quality. Again, a dog is loyal. A dog will sacrifice himself for the safety of his owner. The scriptures talk about how Yahweh Shai had the greatest love. But he said, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Yahweh Shai did that for us. And the elect are going to reciprocate that energy. Obviously not to the extent, not to the extent that Yahweh Shai did. Some so. But that's the spirit we got to be in. That's why I put in the title, man. You got that dog in you? It's a phrase that Jake says in the world, but, really in the spirit, I think that's the better place to apply it. Jake will have a tenacity or a ferociousness or a persistence to him to gain things in the carnal world. But what about what the Lord has to offer? The immortality, righteousness going forth in the earth so that everybody can enjoy the earth in righteousness to this fullest extent, especially and first and foremost, the family of Israel. We're going to enjoy it on a much higher level than the nations will. All right, but that's a quality that we have to possess. And everybody, especially in this part in the Lord's movie with all that's going on, with all the prophecy that's happening. We're going to be put in situations that are uncomfortable, man. But regardless of how uncomfortable things are, keep the main thing the main thing. Uphold your responsibilities to the Lord. Trust him. Stick to the code to the best of your abilities. And everything will pan out the way it's supposed to. So with that being said, I want to give all praises once more to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakah HaKodash. I want to give double honor to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. I want to say shalom to all the brothers and, of course, the few sisters pursuing this truth in sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. Shalom.